will rock. What is up, world? John Shoot here with another Puff Creative podcast. I have the pleasure of being here with a good friend of mine, Amber Bacca. Amber, how are we doing today?
Super fantastic. We're up in South Park, Colorado, 10,000 feet above sea level. So it's quite windy and a little snowy, but we're doing well up here.
Yeah, the wind has been kind of crazy the past couple of days. Oh my God. Like everything in my backyard's just been like blowing all over the place.
Yeah.
Amber, I think we've known each other for a few years now. This past year feels like a blur for everyone. So I feel like we've like fast forwarded into 2021, which is really interesting. And I want to touch on at some point in this chat about Trax Team Solutions and your consulting experience, your compliance experience, all your operational experience, and some really big updates that you have for everyone that are first time announcements on this podcast, which I'm really excited about. But I really wanted to dive into your story and break down where you're from and kind of leading into how you got involved into the crazy cannabis industry that we're in today. So yeah, where are you from?
I'm actually a Denver native. I'm a
Are
rare
you?
unicorn in these parts. So
No way.
I'm a Denver native. Yeah.
No way. So from a young age, you kind of were exposed to cannabis probably sooner than most. Did you start consuming when you were younger or?
I did, honestly. I started consuming cannabis at a very, very young age, at the age at which we don't recommend it at this point in our
Yeah,
industry.
everyone who listens to this podcast knows that we are not doctors and we're not lawyers. So that's always
But
a
I'm also proud to say that, let's see,
yeah.
how old am I? I've been consuming cannabis for like 30 years at this point. No, maybe 26 years.
Wow.
So yeah, got a lot of experience in that area. But yeah, I grew up in Denver, moved to Littleton for high school, got my bachelor's degree from CU Boulder, subsequently got a master's degree from DU in Denver. And other than a few places abroad that I've lived here and there, I've been in Colorado pretty much my whole life. But yeah, cannabis wasn't really, growing up here, it was just kind of around. And like, even when we
Yeah.
did get in trouble, nothing serious happened. They just kind of took
Yeah.
it away. Or maybe I remember one time in college in Boulder, they busted one of our parties and there was like a table full of paraphernalia and they just picked out like 2 or 3 items and left. And I was like, okay, now I know you just wanted to pick up a few pieces. All right. Like, at least I'm not getting in trouble, I guess. So yeah.
Would you say that like how has your experience with cannabis changed over the years? Like for me, like I feel like I started doing it just to kind of like see what it was, and then over time realized that I was probably using it because my ADD was so bad and it helped me slow things down. And now I feel like I have this control over cannabinoids and terpenes. Have you like experienced like a similar relationship or?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that, well, first of all, I do think that recreational use of cannabis is actually medicinal. So I will say that I use cannabis for both straight up medicinal purposes, specifically for sleep, to aid me with sleep, and then also for pain relief. But I also use it recreationally as well. And for me, at this point in my life, having a well-informed, educated, you know, a good range of information about cannabis, even though I know that there might be some detrimental effects long term depending on what you're using and how you're using it and whatnot. I still think for me, pharmaceuticals are not a good option for me. My body's very sensitive. I don't react well to them. I don't want to be, dependent upon having to go and, talk to a doctor regularly. So yeah,
Yeah.
I choose cannabis instead. And um, at this point, I'm just really doing what I can to try and I teach a lot of classes, Sell Smart responsible vendor classes for cannabis trainers these days. That's primarily what I'm doing with most of my time in the industry. And we cover an entire section on consumer education. And, I'm really trying to impart to these, especially these new industry professionals, that it is imperative that we give proper information to our consumers to make sure they're staying safe, they're not over consuming, because A, we don't want to hurt people, and B, like, this is how we move the industry forward, right? We help people have positive experiences and well-informed experiences with cannabis, rather than just, and honestly, cannabis isn't for every single human,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah, it's
okay
something
too.
that we always touch on, like on the podcast, is like how it impacts every single person differently, just like any other chemical that you put into your body. And that's a huge factor, and that's why it's like always just, starting small is always the way to go with drugs in general, especially cannabis. Um, no, thank you. Thank you for the insight. Because I just really am so intrigued with, everyone's different story with the plant and how the relationship has like evolved over time. And especially when you fall into positions like, you and I, where we're so deep into the industry and exposed to all this education, and then it simultaneously transforms our relationship too, because like we're submersed in like the most educated conversations you can probably have around the plant, which is awesome. And I'm really grateful to share, this type of information with everyone who is in legal states, and also especially like non-legal states, and like is going to be new to this experience that we're able to have. Um, when did you start getting involved into the industry? Like what attracted you to the industry? I guess would be a good
Well,
way to place start.
to be honest, I just needed a job at a certain point. Like,
Yeah.
I was already a long-term cannabis consumer, but I had a master's degree from DU in international development, and I literally had like 4 other jobs during this period of time, and I wasn't making enough to pay the bills. So, I had talked to some friends, and a really good friend of mine, Tao, give her a shout out. She actually got me into
Shout
the
out
industry.
Tal.
Yeah, she was like, "Hey, I have some friends, they're growers, they need some trimmers, they need some help." And I was like, "All right, let's do this." So it was this farm outside of Longmont. It was not fully legal, I will admit that. But
It was a job.
it was, it was some of the hardest work I've ever done in my life. Like, literally, it was winter. I camped up there in my tent. I slept in my tent at night. I got up in the morning, trimmed, ate, trimmed. And so I trimmed for like 14 hours a day and slept outside in the winter. And I made a bunch of money. And I was like, ooh, like, I love cannabis. I'm really enjoying like the art form of trimming and making these buds look beautiful and being efficient about it. And I was like, I'm so into this. And I loved the culture, right? Just the people sitting around the table and listening to music and, laughing, just so many laughs. And so it was at that point I was hooked,
So many
I was like,
laughs.
cool, this is something I can actually sink my teeth into. It's something new, it's exciting. It wasn't a far reach for me, but so after that I was hired as a courier for a summer, and then I was still trimming at the same time. And then eventually I was hired, after like a couple years, I was hired on as a store manager for a medical dispensary in Denver. And then I was
Okay.
there for about 4.5 years. And by the time I left, we had several dispensaries and I was the GM. And, it was an entire career at that
Wow, that
point.
probably opened up your eyes to a lot then.
It was so incredible, because at that point it was no longer a job. It was not only just a career, it was working with patients, hearing their stories. I mean, I was crying at work several times a week, hearing these awful and beautiful stories about, how much pain people were in, or, and how much cannabis has helped them, or, how they got off of opioids or whatever. I mean, I still have a patient to this day. His name is Mr. Larry. I'll give him a shout out as well. Mr.
Miss
Larry and we're
Mr.
still,
Larry.
yeah, we're still friends on Facebook, and he's just so grateful that I was there to provide him with cannabis medicine at a point in his life where he thinks it saved his life. And I'm
That's awesome.
appreciative for him, and I'm appreciative that we're still in touch. So that's when things shifted. I was like, whoa, 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 this is big. Like, this is something I
Yeah.
can put my whole heart behind, and all of my energy. And that's pretty much what I've done for the past decade.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I feel like yeah, you almost everyone in the industry has that like moment of um like clarity or like almost like an epiphany about like the power that can be harnessed behind even just the littlest things that you can do in the legal industry and how that influences hearts and minds all over the world at this point. And it's beautiful. It's really cool. That's really interesting that that's how your journey kind of started, because I love to hear when people had like that moment. And yeah, and so did that kind of lead to eventually you becoming your own consultant and like you're an entrepreneur and um, leading into kind of Trax teams?
Yeah, so when I left my position with the dispensaries, I was pretty scared actually. I was like, I don't really know what to do. I don't know if I want to be an entrepreneur. I don't know if I have the bandwidth to not only handle everything myself, but also the discipline to actually get my ass to work every day.
Yeah,
So I was like, because there's nobody telling you what to do, right? So I was really scared, but at that point, I did decide that I wanted to get into consulting. So I was hired on with a compliance consulting firm. And then I was also hired on as a facilitator for cannabis trainers. So I'm still teaching classes for cannabis trainers all these years later, and I'm super excited about that. We're in multiple states now, and it's really fun. I love teaching. I really do. But the compliance thing really got, it stuck as well, because really at the end of the day, all we're really talking about, if you boil it down, is safety, public safety, consumer safety, employee safety. And I was like, wow, okay, so this is something I can do within the cannabis industry, an industry that's helping people, but I can help people and like employees and consumers in the industry. So I was like,
yeah,
cool. And compliance is challenging and it's dynamic. And I tend to not, I get bored easily, I guess you could say. Not that I'm ever bored these days, but
yeah,
so it was something I could sink my teeth into. And I feel like hopefully my intention is to do as much good as I can with the knowledge I have. And so that's my goal, is to just try and help as much as I can in terms of keeping people safe and also helping businesses stay compliant so they can make that money.
yeah. I mean, yeah, compliance is like what it boils down to. It's like if you're not compliant, you can't operate, and you're at risk at any given moment in time, all around.
Well, and even
Um,
you, like I tell my students all the time, I'm like, it doesn't matter what you do in the cannabis industry. Even if you are helping with marketing, you have to
yeah,
understand compliance and what's
yeah, you
allowed,
need to be
what's not.
careful. Yeah, we
Yeah.
always, yeah, whenever clients like ask us for advice, it's always like we always, err on the side of caution with any type of marketing strategy, especially like content that you're putting out. When you're at risk of making some type of insinuation towards like a health claim, or
Mhm.
you're posting consumption content on platforms that it's not necessarily allowed. So yeah, your content always at risk.
Mhm.
And yeah, we have some pretty great conversations with our clients about how they want to approach it with us, because we kind of are not, again, we're not attorneys, so we have
Mhm.
to go off best practice and like all of our research. Um, so you have some pretty big updates about Trax though that I'm intrigued to hear, because I actually
Yeah.
haven't even necessarily heard the full scoop. So
Nobody
what's going
has.
on?
Okay.
What's
So
that?
I said nobody's heard the details yet. This is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
first
It's
time
like this
I'm
is like I need
telling.
to do like a breaking news segment on my podcast now.
Um, so yeah, I launched Trax Team Solutions several years ago, and primarily it has been a consulting and training firm, primarily cannabis consulting. But I built this really cool coalition of experts, and you're one of our coalition members. We
Yeah.
just have some amazing people involved who all contribute different things to getting businesses up and running. And that's been really fun. I've really enjoyed my time doing that. But we purchased this property up in South Park, Colorado, early last year, just before COVID, actually. But we're on 40 acres.
Wow.
And prior to my time in the cannabis industry, I actually traveled around the world and studied environmental sustainability,
Oh,
permaculture. Yeah. So,
that makes
really,
sense.
that was my entire goal before. I call it BC, before cannabis, right?
And then it's like
Um,
that, and then before COVID.
yeah,
I think you're the one that told me that joke, or maybe I don't know.
I don't know. But like, that was my goal, was to travel the world and help to set up sustainable international development projects. And so I kind of landed in the cannabis industry to pay the bills, but then I loved it and it had me hooked for a while. But there's always been this part of me that's like, how do I get back to sustainability? How do I incorporate my ideas for sustainability within the cannabis industry? And I could never quite figure out how to put the pieces together until we purchased this property. So now in Colorado, if you were unaware, as of January 1st, it is now totally compliant for third parties to pick up waste materials from licensed cannabis grows and to take it and do really cool things with it, like compost it or put it in an anaerobic digester or process it and turn it into animal bedding or whatever. That part was already compliant. But they're opening up the floodgates, so to speak, to really help support these sustainability initiatives. And now that we have this property, I'm like, well, heck, we have room here. Let's get involved. So I'm not going to tell you exactly what we're going to be doing, but I will tell you we will be picking up grow waste from select growers who tend to have
just cannabis or hemp as well.
We'll do hemp as well, but I feel like with hemp, they aren't as regulated. So there are already options to divert that waste away from landfills. Whereas cannabis, it's so restricted because of the THC that this is a market that nobody's like hardly anybody's helping to divert that waste right now. So that's where I really want to focus my attention because there's so much waste going into the landfill. Yeah. So we're going to work with select growers who I won't say that they're organic, but they're definitely going to be, more on the organic minded side of things, clean cannabis, naturally grown, that sort of thing. We're going to bring that waste material up here. We're going to process it. We're going to make some really cool things out of it. And the intention is, once we get this established and we show proof of concept, the intention is to relaunch my international nonprofit and take this and use it as a model for other individuals and communities around the world to be able to A, divert waste, and B, create a business out of it and find some, hopefully help create some more jobs and opportunities for people who could appreciate it.
For sure. That's awesome.
Yeah. So in the meantime, I'm still going to do the compliance thing.
Yeah, but that's still something really cool that like you're working towards right now.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued to talk about this offline with you too. Like that's such a good idea.
It's not
my mind's kind of racing now.
Get up here, John. Come on, let's do it.
Oh man, well, wow, thank you so much for sharing that update for us. I'm gonna need to talk to my animator and have like a breaking news like thing pop up like next to your screen up there when we produce this.
I'm so grateful I could share it with you because I adore you and
likewise.
Like thank you. And I'm like, you can see I'm all flushed. I'm super excited about this. I just can't
you should
wait.
be. That's awesome. I mean, it's really cool to be an entrepreneur during this time and then also be able to launch new programs that are only benefiting your community and eventually at a global level you have an opportunity here, which like when you have that epiphany that you mentioned, that's kind of like you kind of almost can see it from like a small perspective and then this huge macro perspective, and then it's really just about refining how you fit into that picture there, which has been a huge part of my cannabis journey, and clearly it's been a huge part of yours too, which I think is really, really cool. Last thing I want to just touch on is, what are your thoughts about everything going on in DC right now with federal legalization? Like, does it scare you at all? I'm like a little bit nervous about what could potentially happen.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I'm with you. I don't think. I think it's impossible to predict, exactly what's gonna happen and what it's gonna look like. I hope I guess at the end of the day, I hope the people making those decisions understand that there are so many people who are employed by this industry. This is not just we need the industry to be running so we can get the tax revenue. Like there's so many ripple benefits.
Yeah, it's like there's so many layers.
Yeah. So I just hope that
I agree.
they keep that in mind. And like, I feel like, you know, at least on the state level, I feel like regulators kind of get that, right? I mean, the cannabis industry is actually thriving right now in the middle of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I think that regulators are really, they are trying to work with businesses. They're trying to work with employees and say, you know, hey, if you do this, and this, and you keep people safe, we're going to let you keep doing this. We want to keep you open. We want to keep you employed. We want to keep that tax revenue coming in. So if they start to shift away from that model, a lot of those benefits would be lost. So I'm nervous. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
But you know what? That's part of the cannabis industry, right? You never know
It
what's right
is.
around the corner.
Yeah, that's so true. And I completely agree. It's scary to think like how much they could ruin it. Because not on top of like the layers of like lives that will be impacted who are like so deep in the industry, like especially people like you and I. Um, it's a sacred thing. It's
Mhm,
not alcohol, it's not tobacco, it's not pharmaceuticals. It's its own category of medicine and plant.
mhm.
And it requires a certain respect that I don't feel the government has, considering like how they've treated the plant the past 100 years.
I tend to agree
Um,
with
Amber, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you sharing the great news with us and sharing your story because I feel like these stories are really additional to what can change hearts and minds about the plant and the future of the industry.
you.
Um, where can people find you? I know we have traxteamsolutions.com, which is the main website right now, and Trax is spelled Trax.
Mhm.
Um, Social media wise, at
So,
Trax Solutions.
yep, Trax Team Solutions on Facebook, Instagram. I'm in the middle of launching the new websites for the new exciting adventure that we're about to embark on. So I've got the domains, haven't launched the websites yet, but I will definitely be very loud about it when we're ready.
Cool. Yeah, and I will plug in links to all your website and social media into the podcast when we publish it. Thank you again, Amber, and I hope
Thanks,
you have a
John.
great rest of the day.
You're the best. Thank you.